Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the Menopause Morning, where every week, once per week, I'm going to just talk about menopause. And if you caught last week's Zoom that I did for this, I didn't have this StreamYard set up yet. But we talked more about last week, we talked about weight gain as tied into menopause. And something that I mentioned last week that was kind of setting up the discussion this week was really the understanding that uh, statistically, about 2 million women in the US enter menopause every year. You could be one of them, right? Uh, Out of those 2 million women, about 75 to 80% are living with at least mild to extreme symptoms. You know, the symptoms of menopause that you've heard all about: the hot flashes, the weight gain, the sleeplessness, the brain fog, the the mood swings. I mean, the list goes on. Fatigue, on all of this. Excuse me. And but that's 75 to 85% of the women. The other 15 to 25% of the women aren't having any symptoms at all. So what, are they lucky? Did they, did they get the right roll of the dice, from their creator? And the reality is that the women who are not symptomatic have either stumbled upon or figured out what they need to do to go through menopause, perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopausal with ease, because they've taken care of the underlying triggers for this. Now, I do want to be clear: there are two true symptoms of menopause. Number one, you can't have a monthly cycle. Number two, you can no longer conceive. I'll be honest, like most women, I've been, as a naturopath, I've been working with menopausal women for the last 21 and a half years. I mean, the last time I counted, I've looked at 7,637 test kits, and I haven't counted in some time. I'm sure it's well over 8,000 at this point. And, and my goal is always to, twofold. If you haven't reached menopause yet and you're still in childbearing years, my goal is to help you reach a point where when you do reach menopause, perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopausal state, it's like a little like bump in the road, so to say, where you're not really dealing with the symptoms. And again, you just don't have a monthly cycle and can't conceive, which most women are totally excited about that, which I'm sure you would be too. so so then the question is, what's happening with the other 75 to 85% of the 2 million women? And that, if you're watching this, it's probably you. Yeah, and I don't know what symptoms you're specifically dealing with, but most common symptoms are weight gain, which I went into depth with that last week, and soon I'll have all of these episodes up somewhere where you can go to past episodes and look at what was discussed in there. So the weight gain, the hot flashes, the sleeplessness, the fatigue that's caused by this, the mood swings. You just can't seem to regulate your reactionary state from a mood perspective, and literally, like I said, that list goes on. But what I want you to understand today is that the reason why you would have any symptoms that have been kind of predetermined or mentioned as menopause symptoms, number one, they're not symptoms of menopause. They are symptoms of going through menopause while you don't have a healthy, I'll be a little technical. It's basically how your brain, your hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenals all work synergistically together. It's something known as your HPA axis. Now, when you reach menopause or perimenopause years and your HPA axis is healthy, guess what? When your ovaries stop the production of estrogens and progesterones that you're used to in the past, your adrenals pick up the slack. You can still produce all the estrogen and all the progesterone you need, plus the testosterone that you've always been producing in your adrenals anyway, to still maintain perfect hormone balance. Now, obviously, you don't need the same amount of estrogen and progesterone when you're postmenopausally, because you're not having a monthly cycle and you can't conceive. So, and even in childbearing years, your ovaries did like 2/3 of this production, but even at that time, your adrenals took over most of the other third. So your system is already designed to really go through menopause with ease. And think about this. If most women have been told, and you've probably been told, all the stories about the horrific things that should happen to you during menopause. Well, I regularly see women either go through menopause without those symptoms, or overcome those symptoms naturally. Yeah, and think of it this way: whether you believe in God, the universe, or any level of creative event that has happened in your life, do you really think that your body as a woman is designed to fall apart at 50 or 52 years old or something like that? And the answer is no. Your body is already designed and set up to go perfectly through this menopause shift in life. And yet there's been things that have happened in your life that have put you in a position where your HPA axis doesn't work well anymore. And that's why you're having symptoms, right? So I want to go over some of the more common triggers for this, and stay on till the end. I'm gonna be on here for probably about another 15 more minutes. But at the end, I'm going to tell you the number one symptom and why this is a common issue for women and it's not a common issue for men. Yeah, because men go through something called andropause. Men can, believe it or not, still have hot flashes. Men can still have a lot of these problems tied into hormones. But there's a reason at the end that I'll tell you why you don't see this in men and you see it consistently in women. All right, so let's talk about the triggers. Yeah, so now if we think about it from the perspective is that you're having what you consider menopause symptoms because your HPA axis isn't working, and specifically what your adrenals are not able to produce on their own anymore. We have to think about what triggers your adrenals. Now, anything that really triggers an inflammatory response will also be a trigger for your hormone health and your adrenals specifically, and specifically that whole HPA axis. So then I'll give you the most common triggers. Now, one common trigger that most people don't ever think about that is a common inflammatory trigger is just stress. And the simple reality, we can't live a stress-free life. I mean, if you say, oh, well, just reduce your stress. Well, good luck with that, right? Yeah, yet we can all learn to perceive stress in a different way and react to stress in a different way and learn healthy tools to alleviate the stress as it comes up. And this is why I teach clients, the women in my practice. I teach them tools like tied into deep breathing. We talk about prayer. We talk about tools such as using acupressure, like EFT, the emotional freedom technique, and guided subconscious technique. The list goes on, but there's a lot of things that can help you perceive stress differently and react differently to stress. That's one trigger. Now, another common trigger, and I know this by working with literally thousands of women through the years, is infections in your gut. Now, there could be infections elsewhere in the body, but the gut is really the most prominent trigger. And it used to be years ago, like even 10 years ago, when I would suspect somebody had a gut infection, they typically had maybe one infection or two, three at the max. And unfortunately, nowadays, most women are dealing with significant infections in their gut. Like I regularly see 4, 5, 6. Heck, 2 months ago, I had a woman who had 8 infections in her gut all at once. So when you have infections in your gut, not only is it affecting your digestive system and your ability to break down and absorb and assimilate your food, but this is driving a significant inflammatory response in the gut. You have inflammatory receptors in every cell in your body. So when you have this infection, inflammation in the gut, over a long term, you end up being systemically, chronically inflamed, and the inflammation puts major stress on your hormonal system. Yeah, so that plays a big role as a potential trigger. So another trigger is tied into food sensitivity, and this plays a role with what I'm talking about with your gut health. You see, because number one, 86% of the people, and this could be you, that have a food sensitivity are asymptomatic. So it's not like you eat the food and you feel terrible right after. But what happens is you eat the food, it drives that low level inflammatory response in the gut. And as I said, that can actually affect every cell in your body, and it's going to have an impact on your adrenal function and your hormonal system. Now, how this lines with the infections in the gut, what is generally causing your body to develop food sensitivities is the problems in your gut are creating a situation where your body doesn't break down protein properly. You see, when you eat protein, your body should be breaking protein down into single amino acids. But when you've got 6 different infections in your gut, that's not happening. So we'll use an example of an egg. So let's say that, and an egg has over 20 amino acids, but I only have 10 fingers. So we're going to say that an egg has 10 amino acids in it. So if my two hands together is an egg that you're consuming, and you break that egg down properly, that egg breaks down into 10 single amino acids. Now, physiologically, it's impossible for an immune antigen to attach to a single amino acid. So if you break that egg down properly, there's no food sensitivity there. But the problem, though, is that when you have infections in your gut and your digestive system is compromised, when you eat that egg, instead of breaking down into 10 amino acids, single amino acids, that egg might break down into 2 amino acid chains with 5 amino acids on each chain. That's what the antigen attaches to. And not only is that a problem, is your body can't utilize the amino acid chains in the way that it needs to. So now that hinders your building blocks of life. So it's harder for your body to maintain and repair itself. And you don't have the single amino acids that create neurotransmitters, which allow all of your neurons in your body and your brain to communicate with each other. Right. So that's it. That's an issue. And I see it all the time where people have sensitivities of food that they never would have guessed, because remember, 86% of the people, so this is likely you, have a food sensitivity that they're unaware of, and they keep eating the food. And like I had one woman not too long ago who had significant issues in her hormonal system. We looked at her stool. She actually had, I think, 5 or 6 different infections in her gut, and like one food that she ate regularly, she's totally sensitive to. And that one food was eggs. And she says, I eat eggs at least 5 days a week. I was like, well, it's good to know that, because because now you know that at least 5 days a week, you've been significantly inflaming your body, creating issues for your gut, your brain, your immune system, and your hormonal system, right? So these are invaluable things to really learn and know about yourself. Now, outside of that, the next trigger is tied into toxicity. And you might ask, who is toxicity an issue for? Well, this piece of research I read probably 12 years ago was done by a university on the East Coast. And what they did is they took breast milk from women who lived in the wilderness areas of Alaska. So they didn't live anywhere near a big city. They didn't live near any kind of manufacturing, yet they still had PCBs and chemicals in their breast milk. And they don't live near anything, right? So the recognition, if you live on this planet and breathe the atmosphere that we all are exposed to, you're gonna have some level of toxicity. Now, my joke when I'm doing bigger consumer lectures, my joke is that, well, if that was a woman in the wilderness of Alaska and I live 40 miles from LAX, like what's in my body, right? So the more populated area and the more manufacturing, the more pollution, the higher of level of toxicity. And toxicity is another inflammatory trigger. Now, this can be an inflammatory trigger for your body, and it can also be an inflammatory trigger for your brain. Because if you've got toxicity and you have poor blood-brain barrier function, those heavy metals or those chemical toxins or the environmental toxins, once they get in your blood, they can cross an unhealthy blood-brain barrier and be very damaging to your brain, which when then be damaging to your hormonal system, because your brain is regulating what's going on hormonally as well. Because remember, your brain is your first, it's how your brain, your hypothalamus, your pituitary, and adrenals all work together. So toxicity is another one of those significant triggers. And outside of that, there could be other triggers just tied into, if you eat the standard American diet, the SAD, the SAD diet, which is high in sugars, processed carbohydrates, caffeine, sodas, alcohol, like all the things that you shouldn't be doing that you might be doing anyway, to recognize that those are all inflammatory triggers. Now, on top of that, other triggers for inflammation could really be tied into chronic overuse of your body. Like, we're such a culture of more is better. Like, it's great to work out and have a fitness routine, but if you do to an extreme, there could be long-term inflammation you're dealing with because of too hard or too long of durations of exercise, or even chronic injury. If you've injured something and you're the type of person, you're not going to rest long enough to let it actually recover, well, that chronic injury is driving chronic inflammation. So these are all triggers, so to kind of recap these before I get into the biggest one, the stress, the mental emotional stress, the infections in your gut, the food sensitivities, the potential of toxicity in your body. Throw on top of that the SAD diet, the standard American diet, overuse in the fitness area, or chronic injury. Right now, the last one, and I'll tell you, I might be the first man you ever hear this from. Yeah, so one of the bigger stressors that I see that puts women, yourself, in a compromised position hormonally, because remember, your body is designed to go through perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause with ease, just stopping your cycles and no longer being able to conceive. Yet if you can't achieve that, you're dealing with these other symptoms. Remember, it's how your brain, hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenals are not working anymore. And all these other triggers are all part of it. But here's the biggest trigger. And this is what I'm going to say, you probably have never heard any other man say, is that as a woman, your life is so much more difficult than a life of a man, as myself. And I say that I'm not like bashing men. I'm a man myself. Why would I bash myself? But this is a recognition from working with women for the last 21 and a half years overcoming menopause. You see, what I recognize from women coming to my office, and this could be just what you went through and maybe are even going through now, the 30 years prior to menopause have probably been very difficult. What I recognize on a regular basis, most women who come into my office, they spend 30 years prior to menopause taking care of their children, taking care of their spouse or their significant other, taking care of their home, very often involved in your church or community. Oh, and on top of that, you work a full-time job, right? So you've spent 30 years overwhelmed, overworked, and overstressed. So is it a question as to why you would reach menopausal years with an HPA axis is burnt out? And the answer is no. And it's time for you as a woman to get your life back, right? Because you've probably spent the last 30 years, maybe plus, taking care of everybody else. And now your hormonal system is just completely jacked up, loss of vitality. And now you're going through menopause, and you're wondering why this is such a disaster for you from a symptom standpoint. And it's because of the triggers, right? So this is what I wanted to really get into in episode 2, so you can actually understand that you do have the ability to go through menopause with ease. And even if you're in the throes of symptoms that are debilitating to you, you can turn this around. And every week, I'm going to be doing a new menopause morning, and I'm going to be exposing you to what I refer to as the new menopause. And the new menopause is going through menopause like that little speed bump in the road that you just barely noticed as you went over, and really enjoying those wise golden years. Because when you think back in traditional cultures, women who went through menopause, well, they didn't refer to it as menopause, that women who went through this change in life were actually honored in their tribe. They were looked up to as like women of wisdom. They were looked at as another level within their community or their tribe. And it should really still be the same way today. And you have the ability to, again, either prevent these symptoms known as menopause, or to overcome these if you have these. And each week, I'm going to go a little bit deeper on this, on what you can do, how you can do it, and how you can escape this for yourself. And it is my passion. This is why I decided to do the menopause morning and do this every week and come up with another subject every week tied into menopause, is because you need somebody on your side that is actually talking about something different. When you hear things about like the menopause revolution and all they're talking about is using bioidenticals, that is not a natural way of getting yourself back into balance. And as you're going to find out next week, and I'm not, if you're using bioidenticals and you have a symptom care, fantastic. Keep using those. But what I'm going to get into next week, I'm going to talk about how the use of just like progesterone and testosterone and estrogens, as an example that I see very often, that doesn't fix your system. So next week, I'm going to help you understand how to fix the system, so you don't have to be on hormones throughout your life, and you can get back into your body's natural hormone rhythm for really the rest of your life. So thank you for the opportunity. If you have any questions or comments, please go ahead and put those below those videos and the video, and I will get to that. And again, in the near future, I will have all the different episodes of the Menopause Morning in one space. So you can go back to the other subject lines that are important to you. And with that, have a fantastic day for yourself. And I look forward to connecting with you again next week. Have a great day. Bye bye.